Hey there. Tonight, we begin a journey not with grandeur or glory, but with muffled footsteps, stale bread, and the persistent question of why does everything in this job itch? We're stepping into the surprisingly unromantic shoes of a medieval assassin, but don't worry, there will be no blood here. Just the slow realization that most things in the past were worse than you think, especially jobs that involved crouching behind barrels and pretending to be a shrub. So before you settle in, loosen your jaw a little, let your shoulders sink into your pillow. And if you find yourself drifting off in the middle of this, that's not only allowed, it's encouraged. Now, dim the lights, perhaps turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease gently into the surprisingly drafty world of medieval murder for hire. It begins, as these things often do, with a poor decision made after an even poorer meal. You were not born into the profession. No one is. There are no apprenticeships for assassins, no friendly mentor handing you a little black hood and saying, "Welcome to the guild. Here's your complimentary dagger and vial of suspicious liquid." Instead, it starts with something far less glamorous. In your case, a bar brawl over a stolen onion, a misunderstanding involving a monk, and a hasty escape into a pile of hay that unfortunately included a rather territorial chicken. The town doesn't miss you when you go, which is fair considering you didn't contribute much beyond occasionally sweeping the tavern's floor with your own body after drinking too much fermented parsnip ale. But now, in the grand tradition of medieval career changes, you are a wanderer, a footnote in someone else's story. And that makes you exactly the kind of person nobles like to hire for the jobs they don't want, traced back to them. There's no recruitment process, no posters reading wanted, discreet individual with strong legs and no moral compass. No, your first job arrives when a man with one eyebrow and three teeth sidles up to you at a crossroads and says, "You look like you've got nothing to lose." Which, to be fair, is true. Your boots have holes, your shirt is more patch than fabric, and your only possession of value is a wooden spoon you whittled during a particularly long thunderstorm. He hands you a name, a coin purse, and a rough drawing that may or may not be a human face. The coin purse clinks with exactly 6 coins. You try to look unimpressed, even though it's the most money you've ever held at one time. The target? A minor noble, not important enough to matter, but just annoying enough to make someone rich want him gone. And here's where things get interesting, by which I mean not interesting at all, just deeply inconvenient. Because unlike in stories, real medieval assassins don't get cloaks that render them invisible. They get wet boots, blisters, and the vague hope that the guards are slightly more interested in their dice game than their surroundings. You arrive in town under the guise of a wandering broom salesman. Not because it's a good cover, but because it's the only item you could steal from the last cottage you passed without getting chased. It turns out assassins spend a lot of time pretending to be something else. A beggar, a friar, a haystack. Sometimes all in the same afternoon, you stake out the manor from a distance, which means you sit in a bush for 3 days, eating cold turnips and trying not to sneeze. The nobles' guards are diligent, mostly because they're bored. They watch the road, the gates, each other. The only thing they don't watch is the scullery door, which swings open just wide enough at dawn to admit deliveries of fish, bread, and whatever mysterious gray matter passes for meat around here. So you do what any self-respecting medieval assassin would do. You roll yourself in mud, tie a cloth over your mouth, and join the fish delivery cart. It works. Mostly because no one wants to touch the fish or the person smelling worse than the fish. You're in. Now you're crouched under a table in the kitchen waiting for the cook to leave. She doesn't. She's having an argument with a chicken, possibly the same one from the hay pile. Time passes. Your legs go numb. You consider changing professions. Again, eventually you make it out of the kitchen and into the hallway. The floor creaks, the candle flickers, your foot sticks to something unidentifiable but suspiciously sticky. This, you realize, is not a moment of high drama. This is just what every hallway in every stone building smells like at midnight: mildew, wax, and despair. You find the noble's room. It's locked. Of course it is. You don't have lockpicks. You have a spoon. So naturally you try to wedge it in. It snaps. You stare at the broken handle for a long time, questioning your life choices. Eventually, someone opens the door from the inside, a servant holding a chamber pot. You freeze. He stares. You both blink. And then, as if by mutual agreement, you each pretend the other doesn't exist. He closes the door. You walk away. Quietly, slowly, forever. And that, dear listener, is how your first job as a medieval assassin ends, with no kill, no glory, and a renewed appreciation for jobs that involve fewer chickens and less mud. But don't worry, there are 19 more nights ahead, and things might get marginally worse, or better, depending on how you feel about hiding in wells. For now, though, let your breathing slow, your pillows softer than any medieval straw sack, your blanket warmer than a stolen cloak. You're not a bush, you're in bed. And that, unlike medieval life, is something worth staying awake just long enough to appreciate. Good night. So, you didn't kill the noble, but you didn't get arrested either, which is its own kind of achievement. You now have exactly 5.5 coins left, half a spoon handle, and a growing suspicion that your talents may lie elsewhere, perhaps in being invisible, but not the magical kind. The kind of invisible that involves being very still, very unremarkable, and very forgettable. Which, as it turns out, is the primary skill required of a successful medieval assassin. You slip out of the manor just before dawn, disguised once again as a man who smells so strongly of trout that even the stable boys give you a wide berth. They assume you're part of the fish delivery. You don't correct them. You never correct anyone anymore. Being mysterious sounds glamorous until it means no one offers you breakfast. The road away from town is muddy, rutted, and depressingly full of philosophical chickens who refuse to move for passing travelers. You trudge past them with the determined squish of someone who has no idea where he's going but refuses to stop until his socks are fully soaked. By midday, you find yourself at a crossroads, literally. There's a wooden post with 2 signs, one pointing toward a village you've never heard of and the other toward one you vaguely remember for having excellent stew and slightly less aggressive geese. You choose the unfamiliar path because change is important and also because the geese might remember you. Along the way, you practice your cover stories. You've already tried broom salesman, wandering friar, lost musician, and one memorable attempt as a traveling dentist, which failed immediately when someone asked what a tooth was. This time, you settle on herbalist. It sounds peaceful, smells earthy, and requires only a basic understanding of which plants make you sleepy and which make you dead. You figure you'll learn the rest as you go. The village appears late in the afternoon, tucked between 2 hills and arranged like a child's drawing of a town: crooked houses, a central square with a muddy well, and an old dog who clearly hasn't moved in a decade. You shuffle in, trying to look both trustworthy and disinterested in everything. This balance is harder than it sounds. The inn is your first stop. It's called the Bent Acorn, which is either poetic or a plumbing issue. The barkeep eyes you as you enter, sizing you up in the way only people who've seen too many strangers can. "What's your trade?" he asks, not unkindly. "Herbalist," you reply with the confidence of a man who definitely knows what nettles look like. "Got a tonic for swollen feet?" he asks, lifting one suspiciously shaped boot. "Do I, you say, and dig through your sack, which currently contains a broken spoon, a turnip, and a handful of leaves you collected to look professional." You mix the turnip with a bit of water from the trough and hand it to him solemnly. Apply externally, you say, as though this is common knowledge. He nods, drinks it anyway, and declares it earthy. You're now officially in business. That night you sleep in the stable loft, surrounded by the gentle snoring of horses and the quiet knowledge that your life has become a slow-motion lie. Still, you're warm, you're not being chased, and no one expects you to stab anyone before breakfast. It's a kind of peace. The next morning, a knock at the stable door wakes you. It's a woman in a cloak that says merchant's wife and a look that says, I have problems. She asks if you are the herbalist. You nod. She says her husband has been ill since last market day. Pale, cold, and prone to muttering about dancing pigs. You nod again, because nothing says professional like unnecessary agreement. She offers 2 coins and a ride to her manor. You accept mostly because she seems rich enough to have real food and because you've never treated anyone who muttered about pigs. The manor is smaller than expected, but warmer. Her husband is indeed pale and muttering, though whether it's from illness or indigestion is unclear. You examine him with the careful seriousness of someone who has no idea what they're looking for. You prod, you squint, you ask him what he ate. He says, eels. You nod like this explains everything. You prepare a poultice made of mashed carrot and whatever plant you found on the road that didn't smell like feet. You wrap it in linen, apply it to his forehead, and whisper, you'll feel better by the 3rd crow of the cock. You don't know what that means, but it sounds mystical. She's impressed. He's confused. You are fed. Later, as you sit by their hearth drinking thin soup and watching the fire flicker against the stone, you wonder if maybe this is the new plan. Herbalism. It's less stabbing, more sitting, fewer guards, more soup. And it pays better. Sort of. But then, just as your eyelids grow heavy and your spoon rests contentedly in your bowl, the merchant stirs. He opens one bleary eye, looks right at you, and says, you're not an herbalist. You smell like trout and trouble. You freeze halfway between sipping and fleeing. His wife blinks. The dog growls. And just like that, your peaceful detour begins to unravel. You freeze, bowl halfway to your lips, eyes locked with the merchant who, until moments ago, was as lively as an overboiled turnip. You're not an herbalist, he had said, voice rough like unbuttered toast and just as unwelcoming. A sensible man might have denied it outright. A clever man might have deflected with a joke. You are neither. You lower your bowl slowly and clear your throat, as if preparing to make a confession or recite the ingredients of a very bad stew. I am learning, you say at last, with the soft conviction of someone hoping honesty might be mistaken for charm. The merchant's wife, who moments before had been offering you another crust of bread, now tilts her head in the same way a cat might when deciding whether or not to pounce. Learning, she repeats. Yes, you nod, as if repetition will solidify the lie into truth. An apprentice, really, of nature. The merchant coughs, a sound that might be laughter or just phlegm. Either way, it doesn't help. Well, he says after a long pause, your poultice made my face itch in 5 separate languages, but at least I'm still alive. You nod again, relieved and alarmed in equal measure. It was supposed to do that, you reply. Stimulates the humors. This seems to satisfy no one, but neither does it get you thrown out, so you take it as a win. The wife, now suspicious but too polite to act on it immediately, suggests you take your leave before dinner. You've done enough, she says gently, which in medieval terms is about as close to get out before I change my mind as it gets. You gather your things, a turnip, your remaining leaves, the spoon stub that's now become a sort of emotional support item, and shuffle back out to the road under a sky that's thinking hard about rain. There's no path forward, not really, just a vague sense that staying here would be unwise and that heading east feels like something people do in stories when they've messed up. So you walk, hood pulled up, mind wandering to what you'll pretend to be next. Maybe a wandering historian. No one ever questions a man who speaks slowly about things that already happened. As evening sinks its teeth into the landscape, you spot a roadside shrine, one of those little stone things built for saints or shepherds, or perhaps a very lucky goat, you're not sure. It has a bench, a roof, and a certain damp charm that says, "You won't die here, but you won't thrive either." You sit, grateful for the shelter, and begin chewing what may or may not be a wild radish. It's bitter, and your tongue immediately goes numb, which is probably a bad sign. Still, you swallow it because dinner is relative. As night falls, so does the rain, soft at first, then steadier, tapping against the stone roof like a distracted drummer. You wrap your cloak tighter and think about the merchant's words. "You smell like trout and trouble?" He wasn't wrong. He wasn't entirely right either. You smell like someone who hasn't had a proper bath in 3 fortnights and has recently applied turnip-based poultices to the sick and the suspicious. That's not quite trouble. It's something else. Somewhere between embarrassment and employment. Sleep comes in hiccups, brief and unsatisfying, and when you wake, the rain has stopped, but the world has not improved. The path ahead is more mud than road, and your boots squelch with every step, announcing your presence to anyone who might be waiting to rob you or, worse, ask questions. By mid-morning, you pass a man standing in a field holding a wooden pole with a cloth tied to the top. He's not doing anything with it, just standing. You stop because nothing draws the eye like complete stillness. "Signal?" you ask cautiously. He nods. "For what?" He shrugs. You nod too, because now you're both committed to this conversation. He doesn't offer more, and you move on, a little unnerved. The road takes a turn downhill, and with it, so does your luck. A group of riders appears from around a bend, their cloaks dark and their expressions darker. Not knights, exactly. Not bandits, either. That strange, shadowy middle ground of men who carry weapons but no crests. One of them points at you. "Herbalist?" he asks. You consider your options and decide the truth is already waterlogged. "Yes," you say. "We need one," he replies. "Our captain's got a fever, and we don't want to bury another one this week." You nod, because the right kind of nodding can get you into and out of almost anything. They escort you to a camp hidden in a copse of trees where a dozen men sit sharpening blades and arguing about soup. Their captain lies under a makeshift canopy, red-faced and mumbling. You approach him slowly, as if proximity might help you recall something useful about fevers. You touch his forehead, which is hot enough to bake a very small pie. You glance at his mouth, his eyes, his hands. He's sick, that much is clear. But whether it's bad meat or bad luck, you can't say. So you do what you've learned. Look serious, make a poultice, apply it with just enough flair to suggest ancient knowledge. You mix wild leaves with rainwater and the tiniest scrap of dried fish from your pocket. It smells awful, which helps. You dab his brow, whisper something in Latin-sounding syllables, and sit back. "He'll need rest," you say gravely. "And no stew?" The men nod, impressed or at least placated. They feed you, warm food, a seat by the fire, and no one asks where you trained. For now, you belong. The captain mutters in his sleep, something about betrayal, about letters hidden in cloaks. You pretend not to hear, but the words stick, hovering like smoke. As the fire crackles and the night closes in, one of the men leans over and whispers, "You're not a real herbalist, are you?" And before you can respond, he adds, "Doesn't matter, just don't mess this up." You don't respond to the man right away. Mostly because you're chewing a piece of tough, stringy meat that might once have been rabbit or might still be moving, depending on your optimism. He watches you for a moment longer, then shrugs and turns back to the fire, like he hadn't just quietly acknowledged that everyone here is lying about something and that, for the time being, you're allowed to lie too. That's the strange comfort of outlaw company. No one asks where you're from or why your boots don't match. They only care if you can keep secrets and carry your weight. In your case, that means maintaining the illusion of medical competence even if most of your treatments involve leafy guesses and whispering things that sound vaguely monkish. The captain sleeps through the night, occasionally mumbling cryptic fragments like cloak pocket and third stone from the gate. You try not to pay too much attention because that's how people get entangled in things. But curiosity is like a persistent itch you pretend not to scratch. By morning, his fever has broken just enough to sit up and glare suspiciously at everyone, which the men take as a sign of full recovery. They slap your back, hand you more questionable meat, and call you Doc, which feels like both a compliment and an accusation. You smile, say something about root tinctures, and try not to trip over your own fraudulence. The captain calls you over. His voice is gravel, soaked in ale and secrets. "You put something in that poultice," he says. You nod slowly, as if this were part of the process. "Smelled like fish." Another nod. "Made me dream of crows," he adds. "That part's less expected." You nod again, running out of gestures. "You know what I'm going to ask you next?" he says, lowering his voice. "I sincerely hope not," you say, which makes him bark a laugh that quickly turns into a wheeze. He motions for you to lean closer. "You ever deliver a message someone doesn't want received?" he asks. "Can't say I have," you reply, which is technically true. "Well, you might," he mutters. "You fixed me. Now you're part of this mess." You don't like the sound of that, but you've already chewed and swallowed worse things this week. He reaches under his blanket and produces a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth. "Take this to a man named Thorn," he says. "He's got a mole like a smashed walnut and the patience of a drunk goat." You nod like that's a perfectly reasonable descriptor. "Tell him I'm not dead yet, and that the plan's moving forward." You accept the bundle, not because you want to, but because saying no feels like asking to be stabbed with something handmade and rusty. The men don't question your sudden departure. In fact, they seem glad to see you go, which could mean they trust you or suspect you or possibly just want more stew for themselves. The path out of camp is narrow and overgrown, the kind of trail that exists only because people with swords have walked it recently. You move quickly, not out of urgency, but because the fewer people who see your face, the better. After a few miles, you reach a fork with no signs, just a tree that's been carved with what might be directions or might be a very confused love poem. You choose the left path, mostly because it smells less like wet sheep. As you walk, you examine the bundle. You can't open it, you're not that curious, not yet, but you do press it lightly, feeling something solid and oddly shaped inside. Not coins, not food, possibly bones. You decide not to speculate further. The village of Kelsmere appears like a reluctant host, small, slumped, and surrounded by fences that keep nothing out but optimism. You arrive at midday, your cloak damp, your boots unhelpful, and your expression honed into the kind of neutral wariness that says, "Please don't arrest me." You ask for Thorn at the blacksmith's, the chapel, the tavern. Nobody knows him, or they pretend not to. Eventually, an old woman selling turnips points with her thumb toward a shack at the edge of town. "You don't like visitors," she says, then adds, "or turnips." You thank her anyway and head that way. The shack leans like it's trying to whisper something to the ground. You knock twice. No answer. You knock again. Something inside growls. You prepare to explain yourself when the door creaks open and a man with a face like unfinished pottery stares at you. His mole is impressive. His patience is not. "Who sent you?" he asks. "The captain," you reply. "He's not dead yet." Thorn narrows his eyes. "He should be." You don't have a response to that, so you hand him the bundle. He takes it with the care of someone handling old bread or potential explosives. Did he say anything else? You think back. Something about a plan. Thorn snorts. That's not like him. He usually says something about pigs. You consider this, but decide not to comment. Thorn steps aside and waves you in. The shack smells like herbs, dust, and the kind of man who doesn't wash unless it's raining. You enter cautiously, noting the low ceiling and abundance of jars. Sit, he says. You sit on something that might once have been a chair. You're not one of his usual messengers, he observes. I'm not one of anyone's anything, you say, which sounds more poetic than you intended. He nods slowly. That's useful. He unwraps the bundle, revealing a small, intricate object you don't recognize. Something metallic, something sharp, something that doesn't look like it belongs in any honest trade. Thorn sees you looking. It's a key, he says. Of sorts. Then he turns, rummages through a pile of cloaks, and tosses you one. You're going to need this, he adds, because if you came this far, you're already involved. You catch the cloak midair, still warm from wherever it was buried, and feel the quiet weight of unwanted purpose settling on your shoulders as the door creaks again behind you. The cloak smells like pepper, old wool, and possibly something that once lived in it and moved out politely, but left a note of warning behind. It's too long in the back, slightly tight across the shoulders, and lined with something scratchy that suggests burlap pretending to be something fancier. You put it on anyway, because refusing it feels like refusing the plot, and at this point, you've stopped questioning how you ended up here. Thorn doesn't say where you're going next, only that someone will know you by the cloak, which isn't as reassuring as he seems to think it is. You ask what the key opens. He gives you a look that says he knows, but isn't in the mood to ruin your evening by telling you. You try again. Is it a lockbox? A gate? A trapdoor? He shrugs like a man who's been asked too many questions by people who later regretted asking. It opens a door, he says vaguely, then adds, but not the kind you're thinking of. Which is exactly the kind of answer that makes you want to sit down and have a long nap until the story resolves itself. But instead, you get up and follow him to the back of the shack, where a muddy path winds through a narrow stretch of woods that somehow smell both ancient and recently disturbed. As you walk, Thorn mutters directions without turning around. Head west until the creek splits, then follow the left fork. Look for the standing stone with the moss, not the one with lichen, the mossy one. You nod, pretending to understand how to distinguish between moss and lichen under pressure. There'll be a door. You'll know it when you see it. Give them the key. Don't speak unless spoken to. And if they ask for a password, just look disappointed. You stop walking. That's it? It works, he says. Nobody likes a disappointed man. You're not sure if he's joking, but by now you've learned not to ask. He gives you a satchel with dried meat, a water skin, and something wrapped in cloth that turns out to be a very small axe. In case of wolves, he mutters. Old people who behave like wolves. Same handling technique either way. And with that, he turns back, leaving you alone with your new cloak, your borrowed key, and the overwhelming feeling that this is somehow still less complicated than your time pretending to be an herbalist. You walk west. The forest is full of the usual sounds, wind through brittle branches, birds arguing over something pointless, and the occasional crack of something that is hopefully just a branch. You pass the creek, find the split, and follow the left fork because lichen sounds vaguely like a liar, and moss, at the very least, is trustworthy in its fuzziness. The standing stone is taller than you expect and leans slightly, like it's tired of being a landmark. You circle it twice before spotting the outline of what might be a door or might just be a very ambitious tree root, but then you see it, a handle shaped like a twisted horn embedded in the stone itself. It looks neither inviting nor secure, which means it's probably the right one. You knock, because that's what you do at doors. Nothing happens. You knock again more hesitantly. Still nothing. Finally, you take the key from your satchel and press it gently into a small hollow near the handle. It clicks. Somewhere inside, something shifts with the sound of heavy wood waking up from a long nap. The door opens inward, revealing a stairway carved directly into the earth, descending at an angle that feels judgmental. The air smells like damp parchment and hidden responsibilities. You take one step in, then another, until the door closes behind you with a quiet finality that makes you feel slightly less enthusiastic about the concept of progress. The tunnel is lit by occasional torches, some flickering, some just smoking, and lined with stone that sweats despite the chill. After a dozen turns, you arrive at a small chamber where 3 people sit around a low table, playing a game that looks like chess, but with pieces shaped like livestock. One of them glances up. "The cloak," she says. He's wearing the cloak. Another, a man with a beard so aggressively pointy it could slice bread, leans forward. "Did Thorn send you?" You nod, but remember the instructions. Don't speak unless spoken to. Not because you feel welcome, but because your legs are starting to file complaints. "Name?" asks the bearded man. You pause. The cloak doesn't come with a new identity. "I don't really use one," you say at last. Too much explaining. The woman nods approvingly. "Good. Names are cumbersome." You place the key on the table. It catches the torchlight and reflects a shape that might be a map or a recipe or nothing at all, depending on how sleep-deprived you are. "Do you know what this opens?" she asks. "Not really," you admit, but it felt important. The pointy-bearded man chuckles. "That's how most doors feel until you open them." They lean in, discussing among themselves in tones too low to catch. Occasionally, someone points at the key, then at you, then shrugs like a man explaining livestock taxes to a particularly dense goat. Eventually, the woman turns back. "There's a place north of here," she says. "Old monastery abandoned after the fires. Or so they say. There's something there that needs unlocking." "A door," you ask. "Something like that," she says. "But not exactly." The bearded man adds, "It's not locked in the way most things are. You'll see." You want to ask what that means, but your better judgment arrives in time to silence you. The third person finally looks up from the game, eyes pale and oddly calm. "You'll need a guide," he says. "And a mule, possibly both at the same time." You nod, as though this clarifies anything, and reach for the key again. The woman places a hand over yours. "Not yet," she says. "Sleep first. You'll leave at dawn." You lean back in your chair, the weight of the key still humming in your palm, and wonder quietly to yourself what kind of monastery needs a key shaped like confusion, wrapped in secrets, and delivered by a man who smells faintly of fish and turnips. You wake to the smell of onions frying in something that once dreamed of being oil but has since accepted its life as grease. The chamber is dim, the torches reduced to smoldering stubs, and someone is humming a tune that sounds suspiciously like a funeral dirge rearranged for spoons. Your head is heavy with dreams you can't quite remember, shapes that turned into staircases, keys that whispered, and doors that laughed. The woman with the practical boots and no visible sense of humor reappears carrying a bundle wrapped in brown cloth and ambition. She places it in front of you with the ceremonial grace of someone delivering laundry. "Supplies," she says. "Dried meat, bread that'll chip your tooth, and a map that's more suggestion than guidance." You thank her, though you suspect the bread may require negotiation. "The mule's waiting by the south path," she adds. "You'll know him. He's the one with an attitude." This does not narrow things down. "And the guide?" you ask. She pauses. "He's unique." You've learned that in these circles, unique often means alarming in a socially complex way, so you brace yourself accordingly. The exit from the underground lair is a different route than the one you entered. More winding, more stairs, fewer reassuring torch brackets. You emerge into pale morning light, filtered through the kind of fog that makes you question whether the sun's contract has lapsed. There's a mule tied to a post just beyond a leaning fence, chewing something with intense disdain. Next to him stands a man wrapped in layers of fabric that suggest he's either cold, paranoid, or fashionably indecisive. "You're late," the man says, though you're not. He has a voice like damp parchment and eyes that don't blink enough. "Name's Fig," he continues. "Don't ask why. You aren't going to, but now it's all you can think about." He gestures to the mule. "This is Clovis." He bites. You nod, assuming this is part of the bonding ritual. Clovis snorts in a way that feels deeply personal. You climb onto the path, bundle strapped to your back, key tucked somewhere close but not obvious, and begin walking north with Fig leading and Clovis following in the resigned manner of a creature who knows he's headed towards something unpleasant. The forest is quiet, but not peacefully so. It's the silence of things watching, waiting, or simply napping with one eye open. Fig walks quickly for someone with questionable boots, and he narrates intermittently, not about the mission, but about mushrooms, clouds, and once, a surprisingly thorough rant about medieval pottery glazes. You consider asking about the key, about the monastery, about what exactly you're supposed to unlock, but the rhythm of the walk and the monotony of his commentary gradually lull your curiosity into a stupor. The bread is exactly as foretold, sharp, defiant, and inedible without a strategy. You soften it with creek water and chew like someone working through emotional baggage. Fig eats berries from a pouch he insists were picked by a crow. Clovis chews a twig and stares at you like he knows your search history. So you begin, once your jaw regains mobility, what's actually at this monastery. Fig wipes his hands on a leaf. Old place. Burned out a decade ago. Nobody fixed it. Too many rumors. Some say it's cursed. Some say it's just cold. And the key, you ask? He shrugs. Depends who you ask. I asked a man once. He said it unlocks regret. Then he laughed himself to sleep in a barrel. This is, perhaps, the least helpful thing you've heard today. You're not much for straight answers, you mutter. Neither is the world, Fig replies, smiling like that's a reasonable excuse. The trail narrows, the trees press closer, and the map in your pack feels increasingly symbolic. Occasionally, you pass a marker, a carved stone, a scrap of cloth tied to a branch, a pile of rocks stacked just wrong enough to be unnatural. Fig says nothing about them, which makes them feel all the more important. As the light begins to fade and the shadows stretch like they're testing their range, you come to a clearing. In the center, surrounded by the stubborn remnants of fire-scorched earth and thorn-choked paths, stands the monastery, or what's left of it. Stone walls crumbled like stale bread, arches that lead nowhere, and a tower leaning just enough to seem mischievous. You stop at the edge, watching the wind play with a broken shutter that claps against the stone with a sound like sarcastic applause. Fig doesn't enter. He stands beside Clovis, arms crossed. You'll want to go in alone, he says. Why? Tradition, he replies. Also because Clovis refuses to step on cursed ground. Very sensitive hooves. You don't argue. The key burns a little in your pocket, not literally, but with the weight of being expected. You step through the arch, stones crunching underfoot, and the air changes, cooler, stiller, like the place is holding its breath. Remains of a chapel rise on your left, and ahead, where the central cloister would have been, you see it. A door, whole, untouched, absurdly intact. Made of heavy oak bound in blackened iron, it stands upright with no visible hinges, as if it simply exists, immune to time and fire. There's no handle, just a hole the exact shape and size of the key you carry. You approach slowly because the air has begun to hum softly like distant chanting or bees with a secret. You reach into your coat, fingers closing around the key's familiar curves. The door watches, silent and tall, patient in a way that suggests it has waited for worse than you. You raise the key, and before you can change your mind, before you can wonder whether you're supposed to knock or ask permission or recite a phrase in Old Middle cryptic, you slide it into the hole and feel the world blink. The key slides in with the reluctant ease of something that's waited too long to be touched. There's a click, not dramatic, not thunderous, just a soft mechanical sigh, like an old man settling into a slightly too narrow chair. The door doesn't swing open. It doesn't creak or groan or vanish in a puff of mysterious light. It simply shivers once, like it has acknowledged your presence and is deciding how it feels about you. You stand there, one hand on the key, the other hovering near your satchel like that might help. Behind you, the clearing remains silent. Fig and Clovis have not followed. The breeze rustling through the broken stone is faint, but persistent, like it's trying to remember a tune. You press the key a little farther in, and this time there's another sound, a gentle scrape, something internal shifting, gears that haven't turned in a long while brushing off their dust and stretching their metaphysical limbs. You step back, not out of fear exactly, but out of the sort of caution that comes naturally to people who have opened doors they shouldn't have. Nothing happens. Still, you wait another minute, then another. Eventually, you tap the door politely. "Hello," you say, feeling slightly foolish, but also like this might actually be protocol. Still nothing. You try turning the key, but it doesn't move. Not left, not right. You even try pulling it back out, but it refuses, as if now that you've committed, it refuses to let go. You glance around the ruined courtyard for answers, but all you find are weeds, shadows, and the unmistakable feeling that the door is thinking. That's when you notice it. The wall beside the door, not the door itself, is different. The stone is cleaner, less weathered, and faintly warm to the touch. You press your palm against it, and it feels like it's breathing. Not in a literal gasping sort of way, but more like a subtle rising and falling under your hand, as if the stone remembers lungs and is humoring the idea. You take a step back. The key begins to glow. Not brightly, just enough to be noticed. Just enough to make you reconsider your life choices and how many of them led to standing alone in front of a humming door in the middle of a burned monastery with a possibly judgmental mule nearby. You hear a voice, not from the door, not from the forest, but from somewhere between your ears and your spine. "Why now?" it asks. You look around, but you're still alone. "Why now?" the voice repeats, with the weary patience of someone who's asked this question before and is already disappointed in the answer. You don't respond at first, because answering disembodied voices feels like giving them too much power, but silence apparently isn't accepted as a valid reply. The door begins to glow at the edges, tracing out old carvings that had been invisible in daylight. They form shapes that make no sense, circles within squares, spirals that intersect at angles you're pretty sure are illegal in most forms of geometry. "I don't know," you say finally, because it's true and because the voice seems the type to appreciate honesty. There's a pause, then the faint sound of something unlatching. Not a door, but an idea. The carvings pulse once, then go still. The key vanishes. Not dramatically, not even with a sound. It just isn't there anymore, like it was never a separate object to begin with. The door remains closed. You stare at it, unsure if that was success or failure. Behind you, Fig clears his throat. So, he says, standing at the edge of the ruin with a handful of grass and an expression of mild irritation, did it tell you anything? Or just breathe at you? You shake your head. It asked why now. Fig nods like this is standard procedure. That's the sort of thing doors ask when they're not really doors. Or when they are, but not for everyone. It didn't open, you add. Of course not, Fig says. Opening is just one function. There are others. You wait for elaboration, but he seems more interested in examining a patch of moss growing between the flagstones. So, now what, you ask? He looks up. Now we wait. For what? The door sits aside. This feels deeply unsatisfying, but also alarmingly plausible. You find a flat stone near the wall and sit down. The moss is surprisingly comfortable. Fig joins you after a moment, offering a piece of what might be dried apple. The monastery used to house a small order, he says, unprompted. Weren't monks exactly. More like caretakers, stewards of things that didn't want to be remembered. Like this door? This door, he says, was the least of it, but it's what's left. So it matters more now. You chew the apple, which tastes vaguely of smoke and time. What happens if it never opens? Fig shrugs. Then it's not your door. And that's fine. Not every door has to open for every person. Sometimes you just carry the key for a while. The key that's no longer in your possession. You look down at your empty hand. It's still with you, he says, as if reading your mind. Just not in a way that fits in pockets. You sigh, a sound that mingles with the wind. The sun dips lower, casting the monastery in long shadows that stretch across the broken stones like memories that haven't been dusted in years. Should we camp here? You ask. We already are, he replies, setting down his pack. Clovis snorts from the edge of the clearing and begins chewing something that might have once been rope. Fig lies back against the base of a crumbling wall. Get some sleep. The door will let you know. Let me know what? He smiles without opening his eyes. If you're worth opening for. Night falls with the deliberation of a curtain drawn by a slightly hesitant stagehand. The stars appear slowly, as if checking to see if it's safe, and the moon takes its time, peeking out from behind clouds shaped like lopsided goats. You lie back against your mossy stone, wrapped in the lumpy embrace of the brown cloak, which still smells faintly of Thorn's hut and whatever mystery spice he used to ward off visitors. Fig snores almost immediately, the kind of rhythmic, purposeful snoring that implies he's doing it out of habit rather than necessity. Clovis settles in nearby with a sigh that sounds like a resigned librarian shelving overdue volumes. You stare up at the sky wondering what the door meant by why now and if it actually meant anything at all or if it just asked things because that's what ancient doors do when they get lonely. Eventually, your eyelids grow heavy and sleep creeps in, not gently, but like a cold draft under a badly built door frame. And then you're dreaming. Not vividly, not wildly, just oddly. You're standing in front of the monastery door again, only this time it's open. Not wide, not swinging, just slightly ajar, like it's been left that way on purpose. Beyond it is not a room, not a corridor, but a meadow. Sunlit, endless, unnervingly pleasant. You step forward and the grass doesn't bend underfoot. It shifts, as if it's not grass but memory and you're walking on recollections someone misplaced long ago. You hear voices, familiar, not specific. People from other parts of your life, all talking at once, but not saying anything important. The door behind you groans, and when you turn, it's no longer there, just more meadow. You wake up to dew on your face and the distinct feeling that your brain has left you a riddle in the form of weather. Fig is already up, brewing something in a dented tin pot that smells of bark and regret. Dreamwell? He asks without looking at you. I don't know, you reply. Possibly. He nods as if that's the best you could have hoped for. You sit up slowly, your muscles issuing minor complaints. The door hasn't moved. It stands where it stood, quiet and smug. The carvings have faded again, and there's no sign that anything happened at all. Fig hands you a cup. The liquid inside is murky and warm. It'll help you remember what you forgot, he says. You take a sip. It tastes like boiled forest. What now, you ask, wiping your mouth. Now, he says, we walk away. You stare at him. We're just leaving? You did your part, he shrugs. It's not your door anymore. Not for now. What if it opens later? He stands brushing crumbs off his cloak. Then maybe someone else will be here. Or maybe it opens to no one. Some doors are like that. They open just to let the air out. You pack in silence. It feels wrong, leaving without answers, without dramatic music or glowing lights or a scroll declaring success. But Fig seems content, and Clovis is already nudging the trail like he's got brunch plans. The road away from the monastery is quieter than you remember, though that might be your thoughts taking up more space than usual. Fig doesn't talk much. He hums sometimes, mostly off-key, and once recites something that sounds like a poem but might also be instructions for cooking turnips during a siege. Around midday, you reach a hill that overlooks a wide valley dotted with sheep and what might be extremely organized boulders. Fig stops there, leaning on a stick he didn't have before. This is where we part, he says. Already? You're going east, he says. That was always the next direction. You just didn't know it yet. And you? Also, Clovis doesn't like hills. Clovis snorts in confirmation. You look at the horizon. What's east? Fig smiles faintly. More doors. Different locks. Fewer instructions. You shake his hand, which is surprisingly warm, and he hands you a small pouch. For the road, he says. Don't open it until you have to. You'll know when. And if I don't? Then it wasn't yours to open. He turns and walks back the way you came, Clovis following at an ambivalent pace. You stand alone on the hill for a while, pouch in hand, key gone, door unanswered, and dreams still humming faintly in your bones. Then you turn east, the path less defined, more suggestion than trail, and you begin to walk again, the weight of something unfinished tucked gently beside your bread and half a strip of uncertain jerky. East, as it turns out, begins with a ditch and ends, at least for today, with a flock of sheep that appear to have formed a union and are very clear about their rights to block the road. You sidestep their silent protest, muttering apologies as you pass, and continue down a trail that seems undecided about whether it wants to be a path or a very long puddle. The pouch Fig gave you is still tucked inside your satchel, unopened, heavier in mystery than weight. You resist the urge to shake it. East smells different than north. Not better or worse, just different. A little more pine, a little less ash. The trees are taller here, not in a dramatic, foreboding sort of way, but in that slow-growing, deeply unimpressed way that makes you feel watched but not judged. By midday, your boots are beginning to rebel. The road turns uphill, then down, then sideways in a way that suggests someone once tried to build a shortcut and lost interest halfway through. You pass a milestone that's mostly moss now, its inscription eroded into suggestion. You take that as a sign that you're going the right way because no one ever puts confusing stones on the wrong road. The sky threatens rain, the kind of gray that looms but rarely delivers. You consider stopping, but there's no inn, no village, no helpful hollow tree with an apologetic note from another traveler. Just the road and the odd sound of something rustling exactly 2 steps behind you, which you've decided not to investigate unless it starts breathing heavily. Eventually, you spot a structure ahead, small, square, and possibly still standing out of habit. It's a way station, maybe, or the world's most disappointing shrine. You approach cautiously, but it's empty. Dusty, damp, and filled with the kind of silence that settles after long neglect. You sit on a stone ledge inside, grateful for even partial shelter. The wind whistles through a crack in the wall like it's trying out for a ghost choir. You remove your cloak and hang it to dry, though there's no fire. You chew on what might be bread and definitely isn't fresh. Your thoughts wander, mostly toward the pouch. It's still there. Still unwritten. Still quiet. You pull it out and turn it over in your hands. The stitching is simple but firm. No seal, no clasp. Just a drawstring and Fig's maddening instruction. Don't open it until you have to. You stare at it. I don't have to, you whisper, as if someone is listening. The pouch, wisely, offers no opinion. You set it beside you and lean against the wall. Rain begins to fall, not heavy, not sudden, just that slow, indifferent drizzle that makes everything slightly more difficult. You drift off, lulled by the rhythmic tapping of water against stone, and dream again. This time, you're walking through a village with no people. Doors hang open, food sits uneaten, but there's no one to be seen. You call out, but only your echo answers. The sky is green. The wind carries laughter that isn't kind. In the center of the village, a well. You peer into it, and instead of water, you see the monastery door, closed again, but the key is in your hand. You reach for it and wake with a start. Something moved outside. A shuffle, a step, a deliberate pause. You sit up slowly, every joint reporting in with exaggerated detail. The pouch is gone. Your satchel is still there, your cloak damp but untouched, but the pouch vanished. You step to the doorway, peering out into the mist. Nothing. Just trees and rain and the faintest impression that you're not entirely alone. You step outside slowly. The ground is soft, your boots sink with each step. You scan the area, calling out once. Hello? Too early, it says. You spin, but no one is there. Too early for what? You ask the fog. Silence. Then a whisper, like a breeze made of regret. Not your moment. You stand in the drizzle, soaked in confusion, until your nose begins to run and your knees begin to protest. You return to the shelter. The pouch is back, sitting where you left it, unopened. You don't touch it. Instead, you sit across from it like it might explain itself if given enough space. The rain continues. You watch the water trace tiny rivers through the cracks in the stone. Eventually, you pick up the pouch and place it gently back into your satchel, careful not to disturb whatever sense of timeline it appears to be enforcing. You leave the shelter at first light, more tired than before, but slightly more aware that the road you're on is not entirely yours to choose. East continues, less muddy now, winding through hills that pretend to be gentle but are, in fact, passive-aggressive. You pass another milestone, this one upright, unweathered, and carved with a single word, wait. You don't. Not here. Not yet. The road bends, and as it does, you feel a new breeze, warmer, spiced with something that might be distant chimneys or overly ambitious flowers. And there, just beyond the next rise, a roof, a village, people. Possibly answers. Or more likely, another set of questions wearing answers like poorly tailored coats. You adjust your pack, touch the pouch once without opening it, and keep walking toward whatever version of next is waiting with a teacup and a slightly raised eyebrow. The village appears like a footnote in a long-forgotten ledger, neatly tucked between two lazy hills and arranged in such a way that suggests it was never meant to be found on purpose. The houses are squat, shingled in various shades of brown and shrugging slightly under the weight of age and weather. A thin curl of smoke rises from 3 chimneys, possibly 4 if the one behind the mill isn't just wishful thinking. As you descend the slope, the road turns to gravel and then to something softer, like dust that once aspired to be road but lost interest. No one greets you, but you don't take it personally. This doesn't seem like a village that hurries to do anything, including acknowledging strangers. The first person you see is an old man with a broom made of twigs who is sweeping the same square of dirt outside a shuttered shop. He doesn't look up, and you don't interrupt. There's a sign above the door, weathered but legible, Tarlo's Goods, mostly honest. You pass a well in the square that gurgles faintly as if complaining about the cold, and then spot the inn, which appears to be both the largest building and the most asleep. A crooked sign dangles above the door, the Sleeping Tater. You push the door open with the kind of cautious optimism one uses with cats and old furniture. Inside, the inn smells of cabbage and something warmly spiced that might once have been considered tea. A single figure sits at a table near the hearth, an innkeeper, presumably balding, round-shouldered, and humming to himself in a key that seems unaware of other keys. He looks up as you enter. "Well then," he says, not unkindly, "you're late." You blink. "Late for what?" He shrugs. "Whatever brought you here." You don't argue. Door sticks. Kick it with your heel. You follow instructions. The room is small, the bed sloped in the middle like it's tired of holding up other people's dreams, but there's a window and a breeze and a clean blanket that smells faintly of lavender and sawdust. You sit by the window for a while, watching the village be exactly as slow as you expected. A woman carries a basket of something indistinct from one end of the square to the other. A boy tries to teach a goat to bow. The goat seems unimpressed. You wonder what brought you here, besides a vague sense of direction and pouch you still haven't opened. You remove it from your satchel, place it on the windowsill, and stare at it. It stares back, or seems to. The drawstring remains tightly wound, untouched. You consider opening it, just to see, but something holds you back. Not fear, just a sense that it would be rude. Instead, you nap. The bed embraces you like an old acquaintance, reluctantly, with a bit of creaking, but ultimately with a surprising degree of comfort. You dream again. This time, it's a table, a round one. Covered in maps that move when you look away, people sit around it faceless but familiar, whispering things in a language made of shapes. At the center of the table, your pouch, open, and from it pours light. Not blinding, just persistent. Like a sunrise that doesn't care if you're ready, you reach for it and wake up to the innkeeper tapping lightly on your door with a tray of something steaming and lumpy. "Thought you might need this," he says, setting it down. "Looks like a pouch man." You stare at the tray. "What's in the bowl?" "Soup," he says. "Might have been chicken, might have been optimism. Hard to say after the second hour." You eat, and it's not terrible. "How long do people stay here?" you ask. "Long enough to forget they're leaving," he replies. "But not forever. This place isn't for keeping." No alarms, no shouts, just the soft exhale of roofs and the occasional thump of a goat proving a point. You lie awake, the pouch beneath your pillow now as if it's absorbing your thoughts through osmosis. When you finally drift off, the dream is clearer. The door again, but this time open. A staircase spirals downward, impossibly long, and at each turn is a mirror that doesn't reflect you. You descend. You keep descending. You hear a voice, not the same as before. This one is softer, sadder. It's not what you open, it says, but why you opened it. You try to respond, but the staircase becomes air and you fall with all the grace of a very confused feather. You wake to sunlight. The pouch is warm, not hot, just aware. Everything is where you left it. Everything except the certainty that you know what comes next. Because the road east is calling again, and this time it doesn't sound patient. You leave the village before the goats wake up, which is the only time the square isn't patrolled by tiny hooves and a general air of civil disobedience. The innkeeper hands you a small bundle wrapped in cloth, bread, cheese, something that might be preserved plum, or a very ambitious beet, and wishes you luck with the quiet dignity of a man who's seen travelers come and go like seasonal weather. You nod, grateful and still slightly haunted by the fact that he called you a pouch man. The road east begins again because that's what roads do. They never ask if you're ready. They just stretch ahead, indifferent and slightly smug. The sky is that pale color it wears when it can't decide whether to rain or just sulk. You walk with your usual rhythm, cautious, unsure, and accompanied by the occasional crinkle of mystery bread in your pack. The pouch remains untouched. You check on it more than you'd like to admit, not because you think it's moving, but because it feels like it could if you looked away long enough. About an hour out of the village, the road splits without warning. Signpost. No cairns. Just two identical paths vanishing into identical woods. You stand there, listening, not with your ears exactly, but with that deeper sense you've developed since carrying the key, since standing in front of a door that didn't quite open. Both paths are quiet, both smell of damp leaves and potential disappointment. You flip a coin. You don't have a coin, so you flip a spoon you picked up from the inn, which clatters once, spins twice, and points to the left. You obey it. The woods close in gently like they're used to visitors but haven't quite decided if they like them. The trees are tall and mostly indifferent. Somewhere above, a bird calls out in a tone that sounds vaguely judgmental. You walk for hours without seeing another person, another building, even another questionable goat. The pouch grows heavier in your pack, or maybe your shoulders just get tired of its silence. You stop to rest on a fallen log, eat half the cheese, and contemplate the life choices that have led you to taking directions from flatware. As you chew, a whisper slips through the trees. Not wind, not words, just presence. You freeze. Not in fear exactly, but in that deep-rooted animal pause that says something is watching and it isn't your friend. You wait. The whisper doesn't repeat, but the air feels different, thicker, more expectant. You pack up and move on. The path narrows. You brush aside vines, duck under low branches, and finally stumble into a clearing. In the center stands a structure that defies proper classification. Not a house, not a ruin, not a shrine. Just a collection of stone and wood arranged in a way that suggests memory rather than architecture. A woman sits nearby, middle-aged maybe, hair the color of old parchment and eyes that do not blink when you meet them. You took the spoon path, she says. You blink. I didn't know it had a name. All paths have names, she replies. Some just haven't told you yet. She pats the stone beside her. You sit, because it would be rude not to. You've got a pouch, she says. Not a question. But don't wait too long. Why? Because the pouch is patient, but its contents may not be. You don't ask how she knows. At this point, you've accepted that people in clearings know things. What's in it, you ask? She looks at you. Possibility. The clearing hums faintly like a place remembering something. Eventually, she stands. You can sleep here. No one will bother you. But when you wake, the path will be different. Different how? You'll still be going east, she says, but the road will start paying attention. You don't like the sound of that, but you thank her anyway. She disappears into the trees the way only important people in stories do. You lie down under a canopy of leaves that gently rustle lullabies in a language you almost recognize. You dream again. This time, you're at the round table again, but you're alone. The maps are blank. The pouch is open. Inside is a tiny door. Not metaphorical, not symbolic, just very small. It opens inward, and from it pours music. You lean closer and wake to dew on your cheeks and the feeling that the air is watching. The path is no longer dirt. It's stone now, ancient and worn smooth, and it stretches ahead in a way that feels deliberate. The road is awake, and you are still carrying something that wants to be opened. You step onto the stone path with the kind of caution normally reserved for ancient bridges and cheese of uncertain origin. The stones beneath your boots are warm, not from sunlight, there hasn't been much of that, but from something older, deeper, like heat passed down through generations of quietly stubborn geology. The road curves slightly to the left, which you take as a suggestion rather than a command, and continue forward. Around you, the forest no longer rustles aimlessly. It listens. The leaves are quieter. The birds chirp less. The wind, when it moves, does so with intent. You get the feeling that if you turned around now, the path behind you would not be the same one you walked. The pouch sits in your pack like a very quiet riddle, not heavier, not lighter, just more present. You resist the urge to speak to it. Talking to inanimate objects is something you've reserved for bad cooking and locked doors, not embroidered linen filled with metaphysical consequences. After a while, you notice the moss. It's everywhere now, soft and vibrant and more aggressively green than any plant has a right to be. It coats the trees, the rocks, even part of the stone path. When you pass a particularly large boulder that seems to have grown its own mossy eyebrow, you hear a voice. Slow down, it says. Not stern, just mildly exasperated. You freeze. The voice doesn't repeat itself. You look around. No one. Nothing. Just moss. You crouch beside the boulder. Was that you? The moss doesn't reply. But it also doesn't deny it. You poke it. It feels like moss. You apologize and keep walking. The path climbs a little, then flattens out into a wide stretch lined with low walls, the kind you see in places that used to mean something. There are carvings here, worn, abstract, and clearly important to someone. You pause to trace one with your fingers. It feels like memory disguised as stone. A few paces ahead, the path splits again. This time, the choice is marked. On the left, a stone marker shaped like a spoon. On the right, a fork. Not the kind you eat with, the kind roads use when they're feeling indecisive. You sigh because you're beginning to suspect you're part of a joke the road is playing on itself. You choose the spoon again. It served you well last time, and besides, the fork side has suspiciously fewer birds. The trees thin out as you walk, revealing patches of low grass and stumps that were probably once called the Council of Trees by squirrels with strong political opinions. You stop to drink from a stream that gurgles nearby, its water cold and flavored faintly with minerals and mild judgment. As you fill your bottle, you glance into the water and see something strange. Not your reflection exactly. A version of you, yes, but older. Worn down. Eyes tired, but somehow amused. You blink, and it's gone. Just your regular face, confused and slightly damp. Back on the path, the world feels different again. The moss has vanished. The warmth of the stones has dimmed. The sky overhead is a softer blue, and the sun has decided to participate, sending down thin rays that feel apologetic. You pass a tree with symbols carved into its bark, symbols that match those on the key, on the door, on the table, in your dreams. You reach out, not to touch, just to acknowledge. The tree hums, almost imperceptibly, like it's remembering something about you. The pouch shifts slightly in your pack, not jostled, not pushed, just adjusted. Like it knows the tree too. You keep walking. Hours pass, or maybe not. Time feels unmotivated here. Eventually, the road dips into a small hollow where a structure stands. Not ruined, not new, just there. A hut, shaped like a story. Smoke curls from its chimney in the pattern of a question mark. You approach. You knock. The door opens inward, slowly revealing a room full of warmth, dust, and teacups. A woman inside, older than sense and younger than time, gestures for you to enter. You do. She doesn't ask your name. She doesn't ask about the pouch. She simply says, sit, the kettle's ready, and you sit because everything in the room is positioned with the quiet authority of a place that knows how to host unexpected travelers. She pours tea. It smells like flowers that dream of libraries. Long road, she says. You nod. Longer still ahead, she adds. You've opened nothing, yet you've changed everything. You don't quite follow, but the tea is good. The pouch, she says, is listening. I know, you reply, before realizing you really do. She smiles, the kind of smile that's been waiting centuries. Don't rush it, but don't forget it either. You take it, careful not to peek. She nods, and you leave, because somehow that's the natural end to this visit. Back on the path, the sun has lowered. The trees are sparser now. The horizon hints at something wide, open, and waiting. You walk slower, the weight of things unspoken balanced against your spine. The pouch shifts once more, and this time it almost feels like it sighs. The trees fall behind like polite memories, receding one by one until you're standing at the edge of a vast field that looks like it once tried to be majestic but settled for spacious. The grass is knee-high in some places, cropped in others, as though a herd of something indecisive wandered through. In the distance, far enough to be mysterious, but not so far as to be mythical, sits a small rise with something perched at its top, stone or wood. You can't tell from here, but it leans ever so slightly to the left like it's been listening to one side of the story for too long. The sky has decided on a color, pale bronze, touched with the kind of pink that appears when the weather is trying to apologize. You start walking. The grass parts reluctantly, brushing against your legs like it's sizing you up. Every now and then you step on a patch that squelches unpleasantly, reminding you that fields, like people, can hold grudges. About halfway through, you notice the sounds. Not birdsong or breeze, but whispers, small, hushed, persistent. They don't say anything you can understand. Or maybe they do, but they're using words that haven't been invented yet. You keep going. The rise draws closer. The object on top begins to resolve itself into something architectural. A post, a sign, maybe a marker for travelers who forgot what they were looking for. As you draw near, the whispers grow louder, still indistinct, but now accompanied by a rhythm like breath or waves or the turning of a very polite page. When you reach the base of the hill, you stop. There's a stone slab set into the ground, partially covered by moss and the occasional resentful thistle. You brush it off gently and find a symbol carved there. It's familiar. The same one from the door, the tree, your dreams. It's not decorative. It's a statement. You climb the hill. It's not steep, but it resists you slightly, as though measuring your intent with each step. At the top you find the post is indeed a sign, though whatever once adorned it has long since faded or blown away. Attached to its base is a wooden box, weathered but intact, with a slot in the front and a plaque that reads, "For what you're ready to leave behind." You stand there for a long time. The wind brushes past, soft and indifferent. You reach into your satchel and pull out the cloth-wrapped object the woman gave you. It's heavier than you remember. You unwrap it carefully. Inside is a stone, not precious, not carved. Just a stone, worn smooth and marked with a single scratch down the center. It looks like something someone held once, long and hard. You turn it in your hand, then, without quite deciding to, you slide it into the slot. It disappears with a small click. The plaque changes, not visibly, not audibly, but you feel it. Something acknowledged, something recorded. The wind shifts. You turn to go and find the field has changed. Not in shape, not in size, but in feel. It no longer pushes against you, it exhales. As you descend the hill, the grass parts more easily, the whispers quiet, and the ground firms beneath your boots. You look back once, the signpost remains silent, waiting. The road picks up again on the far side, stony once more and edged with low walls that seem more decorative than defensive. You walk until dusk, your legs sore but your thoughts clearer, not simpler, but less tangled. You stop beside a shallow stream, cold and fast, and wash your hands. The water bites, but it wakes something in you. You sit, pull out the pouch, and hold it in your lap. It doesn't resist. It doesn't encourage. It simply is. You don't open it. Not yet. But you do speak to it. Just once. Just quietly. I'm listening, you say. And somewhere, not here, not far, something nods. The stream gurgles beside you as the first stars appear, hesitant and scattered like guests arriving too early for a party. You lie back against a flat rock that's warm from memory rather than sun, your damp hands folded over your stomach and the pouch resting near your side as if it, too, is enjoying the evening. For a while, you do nothing. Not because there is nothing to do, but because doing nothing has become surprisingly productive. The road ahead can wait. It usually does. When the moon finally climbs above the treetops, you rise, stretch in that full-bodied, mildly regretful way travelers do, and gather your things. The path continues, narrower now, tracing the edge of the stream before turning sharply toward a line of low hills. The stones beneath your feet are uneven but familiar. Your boots creak with every step, sounding faintly like a tired accordion. After an hour or so, you reach a gate. Not a large one, not locked, but very much there. Wooden, flanked by two posts that are taller than they should be and carved with symbols that curl inward like thoughts trying to hide from themselves. One of the posts has a lantern hanging from a hook. It isn't lit. You try lighting it. Nothing happens. No spark, no flicker, not even the faintest suggestion of flame. You shake it gently, as though that might help. Still nothing. You try whispering to it because at this point you've spoken to moss, stones, dreams, and a pouch, and a lantern doesn't seem much stranger. "Light, please," you say. It does not. But the gate creaks open on its own. Slowly, deliberately. You step through. On the other side is a road lined with hedges that have been trimmed with extreme indifference. A signpost stands just ahead with arrows pointing in every direction but labeled with symbols that appear to be moods. One arrow says content, another says wistful, a third simply reads still hungry. You pick the one that points toward. It seems honest. The path curves again, passing a low wall covered in ivy that hums faintly under your fingertips. You don't know the tune, but it sounds like something someone's grandmother might hum while baking bread that never rises. A fox appears on the path ahead, watches you for a moment with one eye narrowed, then turns and trots away, tail held high like punctuation. You follow. Not because you think it knows the way, but because it's moving forward with such purpose that to stand still would feel deeply inappropriate. The fox leads you to a small archway carved into a hillside. Above the arch is another lantern, also unlit. Beneath the lantern is a stone bench, and beside the bench is a sign that reads, "Please wait to be recognized." You sit, you wait. The fox vanishes into the undergrowth with no farewell. The night deepens, thickens, settles. Crickets start their shift, joined occasionally by the distant call of an owl who clearly prefers its own company. After a while, footsteps, soft, measured. A figure appears beneath the arch, robed, hooded, and holding something that emits no light but glows slightly like a candle made of memory. They do not speak. They sit beside you. You say nothing. You don't want to startle the moment. The figure reaches into their robe and pulls out a small pouch, identical to yours. They place it between you. The two pouches sit silently together like twins reunited after a very long nap. The figure nods. Slowly, the lantern above the arch flickers once, just once. But it's enough. They rise. You do, too. The pouches remain where they were, perfectly still. The figure steps through the arch and gestures for you to follow. You hesitate, just briefly, but you do follow. On the other side of the arch is not what you expected. Not a hidden chamber, not a new road, just a room, round, stone, simple. But when you look closer, very faint lines begin to appear, like paths waking from sleep. You don't recognize them, yet. The figure speaks. Just 3 words. Now you choose. Then they vanish. The map remains. You reach out and trace a path with your finger. It leads nowhere. It begins nowhere. But it's there. The lantern above the arch flares, just briefly casting a soft glow over the stone walls. The warmth feels familiar, like a door you never opened but always knew was yours. You sit with the map, the silence, and the choices you haven't made yet. And somewhere behind you, the 2 pouches remain unopened, unexplained, entirely content. You stare at the map for a while, not because you expect it to explain itself, but because you've grown accustomed to things not explaining themselves and you're not ready to break that trend. The lines that faintly appeared when you touched them remain as pale as a thought half-formed, winding across the parchment like trails of indecision. There are no labels, no distances, no comforting notations like "you are here" or "avoid during goat season." Just those quiet lines intersecting in shapes that feel deliberate but uncommitted. You trace another one, this time with more pressure, and a faint shimmer ripples across the page, but nothing else changes. You sit back. The round room around you hums softly, not in a mystical, ominous way, more like the sound old stone makes when it's been holding its breath too long. The lantern above the arch continues to glow in its reserved, almost apologetic manner. You're not entirely sure how long you've been sitting. Time in this room feels like something borrowed, not owned. Eventually, you reach into your coat and pull out the small bundle the woman gave you several days ago, the stone with the single scratch. You set it next to the map. Nothing happens. This feels consistent. You place your hand over the map once more and this time close your eyes. You think of the path behind you, the mossy trees, the forked roads, the fox, the pouch, the spoon, the door that didn't open, the dreams that almost made sense. You think of the hill with the question post, the woman with the lanternless gaze, the stream that remembered your hands. And then the lines shift. You don't see it, you feel it. The map grows warm just slightly. When you open your eyes, the lines are darker, more certain. A symbol has appeared at the center, an open circle, and inside it, a tiny lantern. You reach out, touch the circle, and the edges of the map begin to hum softly like paper remembering how to sing. You flip the map over because that seems like the next thing to do, and there, written in very small, very tidy handwriting at the top corner, is a note. You drew this. Don't deny it. You blink. The handwriting is unfamiliar but not unfriendly. You read it again. It does not disappear. You fold the map carefully, tucking it into your satchel. The pouch is no longer in the satchel, which gives you exactly 0 surprise. When you check the floor beside your chair, you find it there, next to the second pouch, both sitting exactly where you left them. The second pouch, however, is now slightly open, just slightly, enough that you can see a sliver of something metallic and blue inside. You don't touch it. Instead, you speak aloud, not loudly, just clearly. Do I need to open it now? The room says nothing, but the lantern flickers once. You decide to take that as a maybe. You look around for the hooded figure, but they're still gone. Or possibly just standing in a part of the room you can't perceive at the moment, like a memory that hasn't been assigned to a time slot yet. You stand, stretch in a way that makes your spine sound like a xylophone, and gather your things. You step back through the archway into the cool night, which now feels slightly brighter, like the stars are reconsidering their distance. The path is there again, a narrow one that heads toward a copse of trees outlined in silver moonlight. You glance once more at the lantern above the arch. It blinks softly in your direction, which could mean anything but doesn't feel like nothing. You begin to walk. The forest greets you quietly. The leaves rustle without alarm. The wind seems to pace itself. You move steadily, no longer expecting clear signs or straightforward terrain. A few paces in, you feel the map in your satchel warm slightly. You remove it, unfold it, and see that the circle with the lantern has grown larger. A second symbol now hovers nearby, a line that twists back on itself like a question reconsidered. Beneath it, in the same neat handwriting, are 3 words, not yet, almost. You smile a little, because somehow that's enough. The path narrows again, the trees closing in, their branches not quite touching overhead but whispering to one another in the leafy hush that only night knows how to maintain. Somewhere to your left something hoots, possibly an owl, possibly not. You keep going, your boots moving with the rhythm of someone who has stopped waiting for permission. The night deepens, folds over you like a cloak, and the path beneath your feet curves slightly, not abruptly, not misleadingly, just with the ease of a story changing subjects. You walk without looking back. You don't need to. The pouches remain with you now, one closed, one not quite, both waiting, both watching, and the map tucked under your arm hums faintly with the weight of paths not yet taken but finally seen. The forest thickens, not ominously, but with the slow, deliberate density of something that's been planning your arrival since before you owned boots. The trees here are broader, their trunks layered with bark that curls at the edges like old parchment forgotten too close to a hearth. Their branches twist skyward, not out of desperation, but because they're tired of horizontal life. The moon filters through with more effort than light, casting pale ribbons that sway slightly, as if uncertain whether to land or keep moving. You follow the path, which is no longer a path in the traditional sense. It winds through roots and over stones, dipping and rising without logic, but never breaking. Your feet move with the kind of familiarity that belongs to travelers who've stopped questioning the terrain. Every so often, a stone marker appears, rounded, moss-covered, carved with symbols that shift subtly when you blink. They do not glow. They do not speak. They simply exist, like punctuation in a sentence you're still trying to read. The map hums gently against your side, the warmth now more steady, like a hand pressed reassuringly to your thoughts. You haven't looked at it since the last note appeared, but you feel its presence, its quiet encouragement, its refusal to offer clarity too soon. Somewhere to your right, a stream babbles in a language that has no need for consonants. You think about following it, but the pouch in your pack shifts slightly, just enough to pull you back to center. Not forcefully, just enough to remind you that wandering is not the same as following. Deeper into the woods, the air changes, cooler, damper, infused with the kind of scent that suggests mushrooms with opinions. You pass a tree that seems familiar. Not because you've seen it before, but because it looks like a memory you haven't had yet. Its bark is smoother, pale, and veined like marble that got bored. At its base, a small circle of stones. You kneel, more out of instinct than curiosity. In the center of the circle sits a small bowl, wooden, plain. Inside it, a single object, a key. Not like the one you used at the monastery. This one is different. Shorter. Squatter. A bit rusted around the edges with a handle shaped like a spiral. There's a tag attached, though the ink has long since fled. You don't touch it. Not yet. Instead, you sit beside it, back against the tree, and listen. The forest is quiet, but not silent. Leaves rustle without wind. A branch creaks above you in time with nothing. Somewhere behind you, something pads gently across the underbrush, then stops. You do not turn around. Instead, you speak aloud to the bowl. Am I supposed to take it? There is no reply, but the map in your satchel warms again, A little brighter, a little bolder. You reach out and pick up the key. It's lighter than it looks. Cooler too, but warming quickly in your palm. You turn it over once, twice, then slide it into the pouch beside you, the one that remains unopened. It accepts it without resistance, as if it's been waiting. You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to rest behind your eyes. The darkness there is soft, filled with shapes that move too slowly to matter. When you open them again, the bowl is gone. The circle of stones remains, but smaller, tighter. The tree feels taller somehow, more distant. The air smells of cedar and a question you can't quite phrase. You rise, slowly, brushing leaves from your coat. The path is still there. The forest still dense, but something has shifted. The lines between where you are and where you were have blurred. You move on, steps lighter, thoughts heavier. The path dips, rises, then levels out into a wide stretch of pale soil bordered by trees that lean inward, forming a canopy too symmetrical to be accidental. At the far end, a structure waits. Not a house, not a ruin, a frame. Wooden, empty, like a door without a door. It stands alone, proud in its vacancy. You approach it. The map grows hot against your side, then suddenly cool. You stop just before the threshold. The pouch trembles once, briefly, like it's considering speaking. You place your hand on the frame. The wood hums beneath your fingers, not with magic, but with age, with patience, with long-held possibility. Through the frame, the forest continues, unbroken, but it feels different. You know, without knowing how, that stepping through will change nothing immediately, and everything eventually. You don't step through. Not yet. You sit down in front of it, take out the map, unfold it. The symbols have grown. The paths are clearer. A third note now appears. Trust isn't an action. It's a direction. You read it twice, then fold the map again. The wind picks up slightly, pulling leaves across the clearing in lazy spirals. You don't move. Just a breath you remember to take. Yafraim watches you with the kind of quiet that belongs to doorways without doors, like a host who has set the table but never sent the invitation. You sit cross-legged before it, the pouch still resting by your side, the map folded neatly and warm against your thigh. The clearing doesn't press for answers, doesn't hum with urgency, doesn't do anything at all except exist. That alone makes it suspiciously rare. You stare through the frame again, half expecting it to shift, shimmer, or reveal a glowing path. It doesn't. It remains stubbornly unremarkable. The forest continues on the other side in the same soft tangle of underbrush and mild indecision you've been walking through for days. And yet the air feels different here, denser, like you've reached a place where something once happened and hasn't quite finished echoing. You reach for the map again and unfold it carefully, the parchment responding with a sound like a sigh. The lines are sharper now, the paths more insistent. That tiny lantern symbol at the center has changed. Its flame, once a simple curve of ink, now flickers ever so slightly when you tilt the paper. You don't understand how. You don't need to. A fourth note has appeared, not in the same corner as before, but further down near the edge. Some thresholds are not crossed. They are carried. You stare at it until the letters blur, not from magic, just from tired eyes. You look at the pouch next. Still closed, still quiet. You don't open it, but you place it gently beside the frame. Nothing happens. The air does not crackle. The sky does not change color. A squirrel does not emerge and deliver cryptic commentary. But something in your chest settles, like a weight you didn't realize you were carrying has shifted to a more comfortable spot. The sun begins to lower, its light slipping through the trees in thin golden strands that don't quite touch the ground. You rise slowly, bones mildly offended, and stretch with the same dedication you once reserved for choosing bakery pastries. You walk once around the frame because that seems polite. It has no back, of course, just four sturdy corners and a sense of purpose it refuses to explain. When you return to the front, the pouch is gone. Not stolen, not spirited away, just no longer where you left it. In its place is a stone, smooth, flat, etched with the same spiral as the key you found near the tree. You pick it up. It fits your hand like it was designed for a palm that always hesitated. On its underside is a number, 17. You frown, then chuckle. You're not sure if it's a chapter, a score, or a countdown. But it feels right. You place the stone in your coat pocket and, for the first time, step through the frame. On the other side, the forest is the same and not. The trees are familiar, but more alert. The leaves overhead whisper more clearly. The ground feels softer underfoot, not like moss, but like memory. You walk slowly. The path is less defined, but your steps are sure. After a while, you reach a fork. Again, no spoons this time. Just two paths, one lined with short, stubby trees that look like they've given up trying to impress anyone, and one bordered by tall, dark trunks that lean slightly inward, like they're conspiring. You don't consult the map. You choose the stubby tree path. It feels less dramatic. As you walk, you begin to notice small things, carvings in the bark, tiny piles of stones balanced in threes, a scattering of feathers caught in a web. None of it means anything to you. Not yet, but it all feels placed. Not random, not for show, just there. Eventually, you find another bench. It's crooked, one leg shorter than the others. A leaf stuck under one edge tries to fix it. You sit. Across from you is a stump. On it rests a bowl. Not like the first one. This one is ceramic, cracked near the rim, and filled with water that reflects the sky even though no sky is visible above. You lean forward, peer in. The reflection changes. First, your face, then the door, then the round table from your dreams, then a spoon, then the pouch, then the word wait carved in stone, then your hand, but not your current hand, your younger hand holding something glowing that isn't the key. You blink. It's gone. The bowl now reflects only the trees above, which you now notice are gone. The clearing is empty, wide, sky exposed. You look up. It's twilight. The first star hangs directly overhead. You sit back. Exhale. The map stirs against your side. You don't check it. You don't need to. Whatever's next, it's already waiting. The forest shifts behind you. Something moves. Not toward you. Not away. Just adjacent. Like a thought not quite formed. You remain seated. The bench creaks under your weight. The stone in your pocket warms. And somewhere in the distance, a bell rings once, faint and firm, like punctuation for a sentence no one remembers writing. The sound of the bell settles into the clearing like dust on an unused shelf, fine and faint and slightly expectant. You don't rise immediately. You wait, as if the ring were an overture and not the main event. The forest seems to agree. The air grows still, but not ominous, more like a room holding its breath when someone reads out loud. The stone in your coat pocket continues to warm, a steady glow that has not asked permission but somehow earned its place. You remove it just to look. It hasn't changed, not in appearance. Still smooth. Still etched with the spiral. Still marked 17, which now feels less like a mystery and more like a polite reminder of something you've almost understood. You set it on your knee and tilt it slightly. Nothing happens, of course. That's the theme. You rise from the crooked bench, the leaf still valiantly supporting its short leg, and take a few steps toward the stump where the bowl sits. The water no longer reflects anything. It's just water now. Cool, still slightly green with age. You consider reaching in, but don't. It doesn't seem like a bowl you touch. It seems like a bowl that remembers. The bell rings again, this time closer, still soft. Still far too dignified to clang. You turn toward the sound and follow it, moving away from the bench, the stump, the bowl, and the increasingly symbolic feel of the clearing. The path ahead isn't marked, but your feet move like they've seen a blueprint you haven't. The forest party just enough to let you through, its trees tall and increasingly confident in their bark texture. One has grown a hollow shape like a listening ear. Another has a branch that curls like a question mark. You pass them both with the quiet acknowledgement reserved for old librarians and unspoken memories. As you walk, the map in your coat vibrates lightly, not in alarm, more like a note being struck in a tuning fork. You remove it, unfold it. A new path has appeared. Not one you're on, not one you've passed, one that begins here. It curls gently toward a symbol you don't recognize. Something like a book or maybe a doorway viewed from above. There's no note this time. Just that single new line, drawn in confident ink. You fold the map again and continue. The bell chimes once more, and this time you see the source, a structure ahead, modest and rounded, made of pale wood that glows faintly in the dusk. It isn't a tower. It isn't a chapel. It's a place that holds sound. The bell is suspended above it, not in a tower, but on a beam between two crooked poles. It sways gently, though there is no wind. As you step closer, the door opens. No one stands there. No voice calls you in. But the doorway yawns politely, as if surprised you made it this far without asking too many questions. Inside, the space is circular, low ceiling. Walls lined with books that do not bear titles. A table in the center, and behind it, a figure, not the same as the one before. This one is smaller, older, with fingers like dry twigs and eyes that seem to glow not from within, but from reflection, mirroring something behind you, perhaps. You do not turn around. You came, the figure says. Their voice is crisp, not unkind. Yes, you reply. We thought perhaps the pouch would stop you. It didn't. No, they say, and tap the table once. A small object appears. Flat, round, metal, a medallion, perhaps, or a lid. It bears the same spiral. 17, they say, pushing it toward you. You nod. It's been with me. Not always, they correct gently, but now it is yours. You reach for it, but pause. What happens when I take it? Something, they say, but not here. You take it. Of course you do. It's warm, heavier than it looks. You place it beside the stone in your coat pocket. The figure smiles faintly. You have what you need. To do what? Not all knowing is helpful. But it's still knowing, you murmur. They tilt their head as if that answer pleased them more than expected. You'll need to go now. Back through the forest? No, they say. Forward, but not by foot. You wait, but no explanation follows. Instead, they rise, lift a book with no name, and hand it to you. Do not read it, they warn. Just carry it. It's your map now. You accept the book. It's light, much lighter than it should be. As soon as it touches your hands, the bell outside rings again, but this time louder, clearer, like it's ringing for you. The room flickers slightly, just a shimmer, as though someone passed a hand between you and the world. You blink. When you open your eyes, you're outside again. The building is gone. The bell is silent. The forest behind you is still. Before you, a field vast, moonlit, and empty. You step forward. The book in your arms hums once, the stone in your pocket warms, and behind you, somewhere very far away now, a doorframe stands alone with no door and no need for one. The moonlight on the field doesn't pour or scatter. It settles like flour on a countertop, soft and even and faintly powdery underfoot. Each blade of grass stands upright with more discipline than personality, creating a uniform stretch of stillness that seems less like nature and more like a waiting room for wildflowers. You walk slowly, book in hand, stone in pocket, the spiral medallion tucked near your chest like a memory too shy to speak aloud. The silence here isn't empty. It hums very softly with the steady pulse of something just outside perception. The field doesn't stretch on forever, but it gives the impression that it would if politely asked. The horizon never quite arrives, only hints. You don't rush. Russians. Rushing seems like an insult in a place where even the wind moves with the patience of a librarian. The book you carry doesn't vibrate, glow, or whisper secrets into your palm. It simply is, weightless and unreadable, filled with purpose you're not meant to decode. You hold it close, and it hums once, as if to agree with your thoughts. At some point in the long walk, though you're not sure when, you realize you are no longer walking alone. The presence is quiet, matched to your pace, a few steps behind but never catching up. You don't turn around. Turning around hasn't helped so far. You simply say aloud, "Are you following or remembering?" A long pause. Then a voice, not loud, not young, not old. Both. You nod, though you're not sure if it sees you. Will you walk beside me, then? The pause this time is shorter. Only if you stop trying to lead. You slow, just slightly, and the presence draws even with you. You don't look. You don't need to. The air around you changes. Not colder, not warmer, just wider, like a space that's been made room for. You walk together like that, in silence until the field begins to change. Subtly, as everything does here, the grass becomes shorter, then patchier, then gives way to flat stones embedded in the earth like teeth in a forgotten jaw. The path becomes clearer. It curves left, not because it must, but because straight lines are rarely trusted out here. Ahead, a shape begins to form, a structure perhaps, or a monument half sunken into the ground like a thought too heavy to finish. You approach, and as you do, you realize it's not one structure, but 7. All identical, all arranged in a circle. Each is a pedestal no taller than your waist, topped with a shallow bowl made of the same stone as the one back in the clearing. You step toward the nearest one. Inside, sand. Not unusual sand, fine, pale, and utterly unremarkable. You step to the next. More sand. The third holds nothing but dust. The fourth, water, clear, unmoving, with a single silver coin at the bottom. You pause at the 5th. Inside it, ash. Cold. Undisturbed. The 6th is empty. Utterly. Not even air stirs in its shallow basin. The 7th holds a mirror, tilted slightly toward the center of the circle. You step back. The book in your hand hums again, more urgently this time. You open it, reflexively, forgetting the warning. But the pages are blank, all of them. Yet you feel the weight of meaning. Not absence, just unreadiness. You close the book and step toward the center of the 7. The ground there is smoother, marked with a spiral that curves inward before vanishing beneath your feet. The medallion in your pocket presses lightly against your ribs. You remove it, hold it up. The presence beside you exhales softly, not tired, reverent. "This is the place," it says. You finally turn your head, but there is no one there. Only the wind circling the pedestals in slow, thoughtful loops. You kneel and place the medallion at the spiral center. It doesn't click. It doesn't sink. It simply rests there, a weight joining another. The 7 pedestals do not respond, but the air does. A tone begins low and distant, like a bell underwater. The field shifts, just slightly, as if remembering something it buried on purpose. You wait, and then, without fanfare or light, a door appears. Not a frame, not a dream, a door, solid, wooden, ordinary in every visible way, but the knob is made of stone, spiral-shaped, marked 17. You do not reach for it, not yet. You look down. The book in your hands opens itself to the first page. And at last, words appear, not printed, but inked in your own handwriting, as if you've just finished writing the line, "This is where I stopped trying to understand and started learning to remember." You stare at the sentence. It stares back. The door does not move. The pedestals remain still. And you remain poised between knowing and stepping forward. The sentence on the page doesn't fade, doesn't change, doesn't apologize. It sits there with the patience of a tea kettle left to cool, no longer trying to be urgent, only hoping to be noticed. You run your fingers across the ink, expecting it to smudge, to prove itself dreamlike, but it clings stubbornly to the parchment as if it had always been there waiting for you to finish what you hadn't started. The door before you remains still, its spiral knob catching a sliver of moonlight that has finally gathered the courage to peek through the quiet clouds overhead. The field has hushed into a kind of reverent silence, not the silence of nothingness, but of too many somethings waiting their turn to speak. You place the book down gently, as if setting a memory onto the shelf of an unfamiliar library. The pedestals circle you like paused thoughts, and you briefly wonder what happens when all the bowls are filled, or if the emptiness in some of them was always the point. The stone in your pocket presses gently against your leg, not reminding you of its presence so much as affirming it never left. You reach for the door, not to open it, just to touch it. Your fingers graze the wood, and it is, quite disappointingly, just wood. No hum, no shift, no breath of otherworldly insight. You knock once for formality's sake. There is no answer. Of course not. The door was never about answers. You lean your forehead against the cool panel and close your eyes. Behind your eyelids you see not visions, but recollections, small, mundane things. The innkeeper wiping a cup with excessive thoroughness, the fox trotting just ahead of you with smug confidence, the bowl beside the bent bench, the spoon path, the hum of moss, the warmth of a key with no lock, and the pouch that asked for nothing, said even less, and followed you more faithfully than any companion. You wonder where it is now, perhaps waiting near another stump, under another tree, beside someone else whose journey has just begun and who has yet to speak aloud to their dinner utensils. You open your eyes. The door hasn't moved, nor has the world around it. But something in you has tilted, slightly like a painting that someone finally straightened after years of being just a little off. You take a step back, not in retreat, but in acknowledgement. You sit in the center of the spiral again, legs crossed, palms open on your knees like a question you're willing to ask without needing the answer right away. The book beside you flips a page. Wind or intent? Hard to say. You look. Another line, in the same ink, the same hand. Some doors teach more closed than open. You nod, because of course they do. You breathe in the stillness. The bell in the distance has stopped. The forest is far behind now, tucked into the fold of a memory that doesn't demand to be remembered every day. The sky above brightens slightly, not into dawn, but into clarity. Stars pulse in quiet patterns. One of them blinks. You blink back. The stone in your pocket is no longer warm, just solid, reliable, real. You place it on the ground beside you, then the medallion, then the book. One by one, like offerings not meant to be accepted, but witnessed. The spiral beneath you feels more complete now, like a sentence with proper punctuation. The door before you remains closed, but somehow you are not.